Hi there, I'm Kelsey from beabetterguide.com and welcome to part 3 of 8 in how you as a tour guide can earn more tips. Today we're talking Robert B. Cialdini. He's a professor, Emeritus. I think I said that right. I actually had to look up how to say Emeritus. Professor Emeritus of Psychology and Marketing at Arizona State University. You may have heard of him because back in 1984, he wrote a book that became very popular called Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. Let's take a listen as he explains one of his principles, the principle of reciprocity, and why it's so important for us as guides in the service industry.
So, the first universal principle of influence is reciprocity. Simply put, people are obliged to give back to others the form of behavior, gift, or service that they have received first. If a friend invites you to their party, there's an obligation for you to invite them to a future party you are hosting. If a colleague does you a favor, then you owe that colleague a favor. And in the context of a social obligation, people are more likely to say yes to those that they owe. One of the best demonstrations of the principle of reciprocation comes from a series of studies conducted in restaurants. So the last time you visit a restaurant, there's a good chance that the waiter or waitress will have given you a gift, probably at about the same time that they bring your bill. A liqueur perhaps, or a fortune cookie, or perhaps a simple mint. So here's the question. Does the giving of a mint have any influence over how much tip you're going to leave them? Most people will say no, but that mint can make a surprising difference. In the study, giving diners a single mint at the end of their meal typically increased tips by around 3%. Interestingly, if the gift is doubled and 2 mints are provided, tips don't double. They quadruple, a 14% increase in tips. But perhaps most interestingly of all is the fact that if the waiter provides 1 mint, starts to walk away from the table, but pauses, turns back, and says, "For you nice people, here's an extra mint," tips go through the roof. A 23% increase, influenced not by what was given, but how it was given. So the key to using the principle of reciprocation is to be the first to give and to ensure that what you give is personalized and unexpected.
How amazing is that study? Is that not cool? Are you already thinking of ways of how you can apply it to your tour? Damn straight you are. If it can earn you 23% more tips, I'll just have a whole backpack full of mints. I'll just empty it onto people as we go. So yeah, awesome. Let's talk about how we can apply it on tour. Here's some of my ideas. Why not have a small treat, something edible, just like a mint, but can it be a local delicacy? I've met some really cool guides from Quebec, and they're telling me that they're handing out little maple candies, something small like that, but it has to do with Quebec, which is very famous for maple syrup. Pretty cool. How about giving out a hand-drawn map at the end of your tour with some of your favorite spots on it? This is thinking like a city tour here. I've seen lots of guides who do that. They've taken the time to make up a map with some of their favorite things or must-see things that you didn't see in your tour, and then you can hand that out to people. Another idea that I love is a handout that can guide people to a really authentic local experience. So I think of one of the highlights from a trip to Australia. We started in Perth on the West Coast, and we just happened to be talking to some locals, and we were really digging hey, what do local people do? We don't want to just go to the tourist traps. And they said, okay, on Sunday, you got to go to a Sunday sesh on Cottesloe Beach. So you go out basically on Sundays, and all the Aussies, they come out and they have their barbecue. Basically, they get drunk on the beach. It's a big whoop up. And we had no idea that was going on, but someone told us about it. We went on that Sunday, and it was amazing. We weren't hanging out with other tourists. We were just hanging out with the people of Perth, of Fremantle, and just chilling on the beach. And we had an amazing time. So think about how you can help your guests have that type of experience. Remember though, the more personalized service you can give, the better it's going to be for your tips. And make sure you're doing it before they give the gratuity as well. So I know what you're thinking. Okay, I've got big groups of people that I deal with. I don't have the time to go and spend maybe 15 or 20 minutes after a tour talking to all these people. Well, here's a tip on how you can be much more efficient with this. Is pre-prepare a bunch of different handouts. So for example, you find out that one of your group is really into museums as sort of a history buff. Boom, you've got a handout that's like, here are the coolest architectural or historical things you got to see in the city. You can give that right away. Another person is really into outdoor things. They want to be active. You're like, boom, here's another map of my favorite parks, or here's a really cool trail you can do. And that's pre-prepared. You can have these all ahead of time. Hand those out, have them in your toolkit. Even your restaurant one, try and get a really good diversity on your restaurant list. So somebody comes up, this is super common in city tours, of course, when they're like, I'd love just a really great local eating experience. Okay, you can circle it and give it to them. Someone else is like, you know what, I really just want to go to a wine bar. Are there any really good wine bars? Boom, you've got a wine bar on your list, you can give it to them. Someone wants Italian? Boom, I got Italian. You want Chinese? We're in Prague. You don't eat Chinese, but boom, here you go. Think of this kind of customization and be ready for that at the end of your tour. Your guests will love you for it. Now I can hear a couple of you grumbling like, dude, I don't leave like city tours, okay? This totally doesn't apply. Whoa, time out, surfer dude, guide dude. You gotta start getting more creative. What about curating a bunch of links or things you can send by email? What if you found some cool documentary on the theme of your tour? What if you're able to send some neat YouTube videos, or just a great site with some, a fascinating take or an angle or a really interesting article that you have about it? That's great. So at the end of the tour, you find out what the different things people are interested in and said, hey, Tony, give me your email address and I'll send you this really cool link. I used to do a tour in the Netherlands and used to go by the amazing dam sort of constructions that they have on the edge of the Netherlands to keep them off from sinking. And I had National Geographic did this really awesome documentary on how the Dutch built all of these dam systems. And so I'd have that in my back pocket. If somebody was really interested, maybe they're an engineer, maybe they're, just work in the industry or are interested in it, I say, oh yeah, here, I'll email you this documentary because it was just online. And they will always be super pumped. They'd come back and say, oh, that was so good. Thank you so much for sending that. And that's something that you can just pre-prepare. Have a bunch of those things ready for whoever is on your tour. Remember, like the video said, you've got to make it seem like it's not something you do all the time, that it's just routine. Remember when the waiter stopped and turned back and gave some extra ones. So you can do this in your tour, even just by saying little things like, normally you don't do this sort of thing, but I really like you guys, so I'm going to show you something special. Something like that. Get in the habit of saying those kinds of phrases, and the perceived value is going to go way up. Okay, to conclude this video, I'm going to tell you a story about one of the biggest tips that I've ever received. So I was working a trip in Costa Rica. It was just sort of a walking, hiking tour. We were seeing lots of different parts of the country. And there was a couple who were birders. They were really into birds. They were loving all of the birds that we were seeing in Costa Rica, but there weren't any birding specific activities. So I checked in with the hotel one evening to see if there were any local bird guides. Sure enough, there were. I called one up and asked if he'd be able to do an early morning tour the next day. Just a chance, like an hour, 45 minutes, this sort of thing, before our scheduled activities. That night at dinner, I went and checked with the two and said, hey, look, I know you're really into birding. I made a couple calls and there's a guide tomorrow morning that can do a private tour just for you two guys before the regular activities. Here's how much it would cost. Are you guys interested? Of course, they were overjoyed. They said, yeah, that's incredible. So I called the guide back. They set up. The next morning, they got up, went, had their birding experience, came back, were just over the moon and couldn't believe that I'd done that just for them. So at the end of the tour, the end of the week, I got this super generous tip from them, multiple hundreds of dollars, very, very generous tip. Plus, later that week, they wrote a letter to the company, my employer, saying what I had done and how I was one of the best guides that they'd ever had. All of that just for an extra 15, 20 minutes of work one evening, just making a couple calls. Plus, that local guide was just as excited, right? Because I got him some extra work. So keep that in mind and think of ways that you can recreate that for your guests on your tours. Reciprocity is the key, but always be the first to give. That's basically how it's worked. And if you give generously, chances are you'll receive generously in gratuities. In our next video, we're going to talk about why it's so important to connect with your guests and why that's important for tipping and how you can do it if you've got a short period of time. But before you go, pop down to those comments. Let me know what you think about the principle of reciprocity. Are you excited? Are you jazzed? How are you going to incorporate that on your next tour? Thanks.